Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. We have more gaming and PlayStation news, rumours and leaks to go over. If you enjoyed today's video, please show your support by hitting that like button and don't forget to tune into the PlayStation podcast every Sunday at 7 PM UK time. So CD Projekt Red, the studio behind the Witcher series and Cyberpunk 2077, is making a big change in how it approaches game development. Historically, the team developed their games with PC in mind first, and only later would they scale them down to work on consoles. But for The Witcher 4, they're flipping that script entirely. In a recent interview with Digital Foundry following the State of Unreal presentation, Charles Tremblay, CD Projekt Red's VP of Technology, explained that the studio is now taking a console-first development approach. What that means is that this time round, PlayStation 5 and Xbox consoles will be the lead platforms during development, not just an afterthought. According to Tremblay, the priority is the PlayStation platform first and foremost, with the goal to make The Witcher 4 run at a full 60 frames per second with ray tracing on the PlayStation 5. That's a big leap from previous entries in the series, which often had to sacrifice performance for visuals, especially on consoles. He admitted that in the past, starting with the PC made it tough for them to get the same experience on consoles later down the line. So now they're trying to avoid repeating those mistakes by making performance on consoles a top priority right from the start. Now let's be clear, The Witcher 4 is still in its early stages of development. What was shown recently was only a tech demo, not a full gameplay reveal. There's no combat yet, and a lot of the core systems are not even implemented, but the ambition is clearly there. The team wants to hit that 60 frames per second target, and they're building the game using Unreal Engine 5 to try to make that happen. Now, speaking to Digital Foundry, the developer has discussed getting the game to run at a high frame rate on Microsoft's lower spec machine, that's the Series S. Now, speaking about the Xbox Series S, Charles Tremblay said that 60 frames per second will be extremely challenging on the Series S console. It's currently a mandatory requirement for developers to ensure that their games are compatible with both Xbox Series X and the Xbox Series S in order for them to release for both consoles. But developers have already argued that having to cater to Microsoft's entry-level console limits the potential of current generation games. In December 2023, Baldur's Gate 3 received a delayed release on the Xbox Series S and X after Microsoft allowed Larian Studios to launch the Series S version without split-screen co-op, a mode it had been struggling to get working sufficiently on the lower-powered console. One interesting change for longtime fans of the series is that Geralt of Rivia will no longer be the main character. Instead, The Witcher 4 will follow Ciri as the new lead. She's stepping into the spotlight this time, and her character has been recast. As for a release date, don't hold your breath just yet. CD Projekt Red has confirmed that the game won't be released until 2026 at least. So while the excitement is definitely building, we've still got a long way to go. And this is probably one of those games that will come out at the end of the PlayStation 5 console generation, if indeed it's coming out in 2026, maybe even 2027. And it will probably get a remaster for the PlayStation 6. Coming out in 27 or 2028. So guys, what are your thoughts on The Witcher being developed with a console first approach rather than PC first? And also that the game will be developed with the PlayStation in mind first. I mean, to be completely honest, right now it's a foregone conclusion that every third-party game being developed will be developed with PlayStation in mind first. The PS5, like I mentioned in the podcast yesterday, is on track to hit over 100 million consoles being sold by the end of next year. Every single developer would want their game being played best on the PlayStation 5. Developers want to know that the platform with the most players, the higher user base, which is the PlayStation platform, has our game on it, which is best optimized for that platform. Rightly or wrongly, as a developer, you want your games associated with PlayStation right now. The user base is massive, and so if The Witcher 4 was highly optimized on the PlayStation 5, CD Projekt Red are hoping that this will encourage more sales. And let's be real, in 2 or 3 years' time, what is the Xbox install base even going to be? So it's the right call at this stage for CD Projekt Red to focus on having a highly optimized Witcher 4 game running best on the platform with the larger player base, and that is the PlayStation 5. Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments about this, and let's move on. Now, Rob Whitehoff, the voice actor behind the iconic John Marston, has stirred up the Red Dead community with a tease that's got everyone talking and excited. During a recent live stream, Whitehoff hinted that he's got some very exciting news to share, but he's not allowed to say what it is just yet. He goes on to say that he's got some big news that he's dying to tell fans, and he hopes it'll be out there before the end of the week. He made it clear that it's something he won't be the only one talking about, which hints that it could be part of a larger announcement, maybe from Rockstar Games themselves. Although he didn't name the game directly, The way he spoke suggested the announcement could be related to either the original Red Dead Redemption game or the sequel Red Dead Redemption 2. That has fans speculating all over again, because recently we heard rumors about Rockstar remaking or remastering several games ready for the Switch 2, which included a remastered version of GTA 4. And alongside that, there were rumors and reports about a Red Dead Redemption 2 either patch or a next-gen remaster to be released onto the Switch 2 and also to be released onto current generation Xbox and PlayStation platforms. So the question everybody is asking is, are we finally getting a next-gen Red Dead Redemption 2? The original Red Dead Redemption first came out in 2010 on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. It was a groundbreaking open-world western that set the stage for Red Dead Redemption 2. More recently, the original game was ported to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One and even the Nintendo Switch. So with all that groundwork already laid down, a full remaster or enhanced re-release for PlayStation 5 and Xbox wouldn't be a huge surprise. It would actually make a lot of sense. But for now, all we can do is wait. Rob's hint sounded like we know something before Friday, so keep your eyes peeled, and when the news drops, you can be sure I'll be covering it right here on the channel. So let's move on. Stellar Blade, developed by Korean studio Shift Up, has officially become one of Sony's most successful single-player games to launch on PC, and that is no small achievement. Originally released as a PlayStation 5 exclusive game, Stellar Blade gained a lot of attention for its flashy combat, sleek visuals, unique sci-fi setting, and lead characters. Now, it's been brought over to PC, and the response has been phenomenal. Shift Up confirmed that Stellar Blade has crossed officially 3 million total sales across both PlayStation 5 and PC platforms. Now, what's impressive is how fast the PC version took off. Within just 3 days of its release on Steam, the game has sold over 1 million copies, a massive jump that helped push total sales over that 3 million mark. Steam data backs this up as well. According to SteamDB, the game reached a peak of 192,000 concurrent players shortly after launch, setting a new record for Sony when it comes to single-player titles on PC. For comparison, Ghost of Tsushima, another popular Sony-published PC port, topped out at around 77,000 players. So Stellar Blade didn't just beat that number, it more than doubled it. Now, Helldivers 2 still holds the record for Sony's biggest PC launch overall, with nearly 460,000 active players at peak, but that's a multiplayer-focused game. Amongst solo experiences, Stellar Blade stands in a league of its own. It is worth noting that although Sony is publishing Stellar Blade on both PS5 and PC, the developer Shift Up is still an independent studio right now as things stand. They're not owned by Sony or officially part of PlayStation Studios. That independence could be a big reason why the game feels a little bit different from traditional Sony exclusives. With the game now available on PC, another piece of news that caught my eye, which may help explain some of the sales with regards to Stellar Blade, comes from the modding scene. And let's just say things get weird fast. Modders wasted no time diving into Stellar Blade. Within days of the game's release, hundreds of user-created mods started popping up online. While mods are nothing new for PC games, the sheer speed and variety of content for Stellar Blade was surprising. A lot of the early mods focused on the game's main character, Eve. Some of these were just light-hearted cosmetic changes, new outfits, or visual tweaks, but a large number of modders took things to new extremes. We're talking everything from NSFW character edits, nudity mods, and even pregnancy mods to bizarre things like swapping Eve's hands for feet. There are even mods that completely changed the game's title screen, replacing the serious sci-fi vibe with full-blown adult anime scenes. And while this has obviously drawn criticism and more than a few laughs, it also highlights just how quickly the modding community embraced this game. To be fair, not all mods are over the top. Some are genuinely creative. Fans have created iconic outfits from other franchises like Darkstalker's Morrigan or characters from Sailor Moon. So while the more proactive mods are grabbing the headlines, there's actually a wide variety of content being developed by passionate fans. Shift Up has even acknowledged the flood of mods, and they've taken a surprisingly light-hearted approach. They haven't cracked down on the modding community, at least not yet. It seems that they expected this kind of attention given Eve's eye-catching design and the game's overall aesthetic. Now, whilst we're talking about Stellar Blade being ported over to PC, over the last few years, Sony has been slowly porting more of its console exclusives to PC, so for a while it seemed like a big win. Players who didn't own a PlayStation console could still enjoy some of Sony's best titles, and Sony opened up a new revenue stream, so it seemed like a win-win. But recently that process has hit some speed bumps, especially around account linking and regional restrictions. It started with Helldivers 2 when Sony tried to force PC players to link their Steam accounts with a PlayStation Network account. While this might seem like a small ask, it turned into a huge problem because the PlayStation Network is not available in over 100 countries. That meant a huge chunk of the global audience was simply locked out of playing any game that PlayStation released, even though they could buy it on Steam. But because the PlayStation Network wasn't available in their country, they didn't have access to it. And it wasn't just Helldivers 2. The same issue affected other PC releases, including Stellar Blade, even though Sony only served as the game's publisher. Now, thankfully, it looks like Sony may finally be backing off this policy. According to recent updates, the region restrictions for several major titles like God of War Ragnarok, The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, Marvel's Spider-Man 2, and even Helldivers 2 have now all been removed. The recently released Days Gone Remastered launched without any region locks at all, which might signal a new shift in how Sony handles its PC releases moving forward. This is a big deal because it means more gamers from around the world will actually have access to Sony's games without needing a PlayStation console or a PSN account. It's a move that just makes sense right now, especially if Sony wants to be a serious player in the PC market. It's about time Sony did this. As we discussed on the podcast yesterday, if Sony is embracing PC, they need to go all in, right? If they're going to release their games on PC after a period of exclusivity on the PlayStation 5, then they just need to release it everywhere on PC and not have it restricted to certain countries, or at the very least, fix PlayStation Network and make sure it's available in every country so it doesn't stop players from signing up and playing the PlayStation games that are released eventually onto Steam. I think it's a good move. It's better late than never after all, right? So good news all round, but guys, what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and let's move on. So Gears of War Reloaded just launched its multiplayer beta. What's especially interesting is that it's available not only to Xbox Series X and S, but also on PlayStation 5 and the new PlayStation 5 Pro. So naturally, people are asking, how do these versions stack up against each other? From a graphics settings standpoint, the game looks almost identical on the PlayStation 5, the Pro, and the Xbox Series X. Whether you're in graphics mode or performance mode, these three platforms deliver a very similar visual experience. However, there are some small visual downgrades on the Xbox Series S. Specifically, players may notice a bit of texture popping or shadow flickering in both modes on that system. It's nothing game-breaking, but it is worth noting if you're playing on the Series S. The game uses dynamic resolution scaling to maintain performance. On the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, graphics mode runs between 1440p and 1552p, while performance mode lowers that to between 914p and 1080p. The PS5 Pro, being the newer and more powerful hardware, pushes those numbers even higher. In graphics mode, it runs between 1440p and 1800p, and in performance mode, it's between 1440p and 1607p. The Series S, however, offers a range of 960p to 1080p in graphics mode and drops to 700p to 960p in performance mode. As for frame rates, all four consoles target 60 frames per second in graphics mode and 120 FPS in performance mode. Each version does hold up well, hitting those targets consistently throughout multiplayer matches. Keep in mind though, this data is from the beta, so things could change in the final release. But as it stands, the PlayStation 5 Pro currently delivers the highest average resolution, especially in performance mode, while the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X are neck and neck in terms of overall visual quality. The Series S offers a decent performance, but with noticeable compromises. From the early beta test, so long as you're not playing on the Series S, I guess your experience with Gears Remastered will be a fairly decent one. So let's move on to Final Fantasy XVI. Originally, the game released as a PlayStation 5 exclusive in 2023, the game has finally made its way to Xbox Series S and X, but according to early technical analysis, the port might not be living up to expectations, especially when compared to the PlayStation 5 version. Digital Foundry took a look at both versions, focusing on early cutscenes and general gameplay performance. One of the biggest issues is the resolution. In graphics mode, the PlayStation 5 version renders at 1440p. The Xbox Series X version drops to 1224p. That's a noticeable difference in sharpness and clarity. There are also big problems with foliage rendering on Xbox. Some trees and bushes don't seem to display correctly, making the world look unfinished or broken in certain areas. This is something not present on the PlayStation 5 version. In performance mode, which is meant to prioritize smoother gameplay by boosting frame rates, the gap is even wider. On the PlayStation 5, the game runs at around 1080p, though not perfectly consistently. The frame rate sometimes dips between 45 and 60 frames per second. On the Series X, the resolution is lower at 720p, but the frame rate is locked to 60 frames per second, making the gameplay feel smoother even though it looks a bit rougher. The cutscenes across all platforms are capped at 30 frames per second, so there's no difference there. So while the Xbox version does achieve a consistent performance in performance mode, it does so at the cost of visual quality. It's a trade-off that some players might be happy with, they might accept that, but it is clear that the PlayStation 5 version still holds the edge in overall graphical quality. While the port of Final Fantasy XVI has its issues, the bigger story here is about Final Fantasy's future direction. During the recent Summer Game Fest, Square Enix announced that Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is also coming to Xbox platforms. It's a big move considering that the game has been exclusive to PlayStation since its release. Even more surprising is that the remake is also heading to Nintendo's upcoming Switch 2. These announcements come after Square Enix admitted that sales of Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth didn't meet expectations. In response, the company had decided to move away from platform exclusivity and instead focus on a multi-platform strategy going forward. The shift suggests that Square Enix is trying to reach a broader audience and avoid the limitations of tying major games to a single platform. In the long run, this could mean that future Final Fantasy titles and possibly other big Square Enix releases will launch on all major platforms right from the start. If I'm honest, I don't think they will see a bump in sales by releasing Final Fantasy onto Xbox. Honestly, unless the game is dropped into Game Pass, they will hardly sell anything on the Xbox platform. It won't make any difference, no dent in revenue. Like I say, unless it drops into Game Pass, where Microsoft then gives the developers some funding for having their game drop into that service. Where they could have some success is on Nintendo. That I could see taking off. If they release their games day and day onto Nintendo, I could see Nintendo gamers buying into that franchise. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments about the content discussed today, and I'll catch you on the next video.